Coming up on Global Business, during his two-day state visit to Vietnam, Chinese President Xi Jinping says China-Vietnam ties will enter a new stage through joint efforts. China holds its Central Economic Work Conference to map out economic priorities for next year, as the meeting notes the country's economic recovery and solid progress in high-quality development. And as the COP28 climate summit enters its final day, divisions still linger on reaching a final deal to phase out fossil fuels. And welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Our top story this hour, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee and Chinese President Xi Jinping says China-Vietnam ties will enter a new stage through joint efforts. Xi met with Nguyen Phu Trong, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee in Hanoi. During their meeting, Xi said China firmly supports Vietnam's cause of socialist construction. He said China has always seen ties with Vietnam from a strategic and long-term perspective. Both sides also jointly witnessed the signing of cooperation documents. President Xi, along with his wife Peng Liyuan, will attend a welcoming banquet hosted by the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, Nguyen Phu Trong, and President of Vietnam, Vo Van Thuong. Well, China and Vietnam have established an interconnected supply chain, as evident from the trade figures of recent years. The close economic ties between the two countries have resulted in a mutually beneficial relationship with a significant flow of goods and services. Our Sung Yao Tian reports.
During the first 11 months of this year, trade in intermediate goods between China and Vietnam reached over 1 trillion yuan, accounting for nearly 70% of the total bilateral trade. Notably, there was an annual growth of more than 10% in the trade of parts for flat panel display screens, video and audio equipment, and lithium batteries. According to customs data for 2021, China emerged as the largest provider of intermediate products to Vietnam, representing over 40% of Vietnam's total imports in that category. China supplies over half of Vietnam's mechanical parts, textile and leather materials, and 40% of the country's cell phone parts. Vietnam's electronic products are among its top exports, ranking 12th globally in terms of volume. Cell phones in particular held the second position in global exports. As electronic items contribute 40% to Vietnam's total exports, the country's imports of electronic parts account for a significant share of its total imports, approximately 60%, while 70% of these parts come from East Asia, with China being a major source. They enjoy zero tariffs. Garment and textile products contribute 16% to Vietnam's total exports and provide employment to 2.7 million people. However, approximately half of the materials required for manufacturing these products also originate from China. Sung Yao Tian, CGTN.
And for more on China-Vietnam relations, I want to bring in Dr. Zhou Mi, a senior research fellow at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Dr. Zhou, thank you for joining us on our program. So we were just reporting on those robust trade ties between China and Vietnam. And of course, to have those strong trade and investment ties, I would say you need strong supply chains. So from your vantage point, what is the potential of deeper supply and value chain cooperation between China and Vietnam?
We know that both countries are neighbors, so we have many cooperation possibilities. In the past decades, we see a growth of the cooperation in the electronics. So I would say that in many new areas, we still have further potentials for cooperation, including the new energy vehicles and also many of the things to do with the machineries. We know that Vietnam is one of the very important countries to export not only to China, but also to many other countries. So both our two sides should try to cooperate to design and trying to find out the better ways for cooperation to help strengthen the value added of the export for both countries.
Right. So in terms of designing and finding better ways to cooperate, Dr. Zhou, are you seeing the two countries increasingly aligning trade and development policies to really build more resilient supply chains in quite an uncertain world, I would say?
Yeah, we have done a lot to improve, to facilitate the trade and investment between our two countries, not only for the neighboring provinces of both sides, but also from central governments. We align with many aspects, including the e-commerce and something to do with the logistics. I would say that for the cooperation, both sides are trying to reduce the cost of the custom clearance and make it a better market access to benefits for the service industries and investors to invest in the other side.
Right. And Dr. Zhou, how do you see the significance of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement? So this would be the world's largest free trade agreement, RCEP, and the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area 3.0 in terms of further boosting economic ties between China and Vietnam?
We know that mechanisms are very important because it will provide a very stable environment for the investors to make a better decisions and trying to involve in the trade and investment. For the RCEP, it's very huge to provide a lot of possibilities for the supply chains reconstruction and while to improve a better place for the related to do the innovation, including the e-commerce. The version 3.0 is of the China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreements is trying to provide a better examples that both sides can cooperate to support the enterprises and benefit with a longer term investment and cooperation. I think that definitely will have a better, prospect for the confidence of the markets.
All right. Dr. Zhou, many thanks for your thoughts as always. Dr. Zhou Mi, a senior research fellow at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Thank you, Dr. Zhou. Well, China and Vietnam are, of course, well connected by land and by sea, but rail connectivity still lags behind. Now, Vietnam is actively focusing on enhancing this area. CGTN's Miro Lu visits a train station over in Hanoi to explain.
Vietnam already has rail connections to China, but the system is archaic and limited in capacity. It also lacks interoperability. Trains have to stop at the border and transfer goods to domestic services, reducing the efficiency of rail as a mode of transport. Both countries are actively seeking solutions to overcome these hurdles. A recently launched freight train service between Shijiazhuang in China and Hanoi is one such example. It reduces travel time by half and helps establish better connectivity between Hanoi and northern China, a strategic location for Vietnamese goods to go beyond the Chinese border.
This train helps businesses of two countries have better opportunities to trade goods. The reason is that Hebei is a province located deep inland, far from seaports. Currently, the time for the freight train to run from Shijiazhuang to Yanbian or Yanbian to Shijiazhuang is 6 days, compared to shipping by sea, which takes 13 to 14 days.
Here in the Yanbian station in Hanoi, containers of fresh food and food products are being transported to China. On the other way, steel and raw materials for the textile and manufacturing industries come back to fuel the Vietnamese economy. Operators say they have witnessed an annual growth of 30% since 2017 till last year. Analysts say that despite enjoying the advantage of its proximity to China, Vietnam has not fully capitalized on its potential.
The trade relationship has been strong, but has been also limited due to not enough trading routes. Laos, for example, has profited much more with a high-speed rail connection between Kunming and Vientiane. Vietnam hasn't been part of it. And it's true, this summer there has been a new freight train has launched a two-way freight and cargo shipment between Hanoi and Shijiazhuang in northern China. However, it cannot carry as much as these newer tracks.
Marco Foster expects China and Vietnam to potentially upgrade their underdeveloped rail lanes, especially through northern Vietnam's rare earth-rich areas. This upgrade will be strategic, as it would connect Vietnam's rare earth heartland to the country's top ports in the north. Miro Lu, CGTN, Hanoi.
And still to come here on Global Business. China holds its Central Economic Work Conference to map out economic priorities for next year, as the meeting notes the country's economic recovery and solid progress in high-quality development.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
The annual Central Economic Work Conference was held here in Beijing from Monday to Tuesday as Chinese leaders decided priorities for next year's economic work. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, Chinese President, and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, delivered an important speech at the conference. The conference acknowledged China's economic recovery in 2023, emphasizing progress in high-quality development. Key sectors such as self-reliance in science and technology, expanding domestic demand, and deepening supply-side structural reform were highlighted. Now, despite some challenges, the meeting affirmed a positive long-term outlook for China's economic recovery and urged the need for stronger confidence. Well, for more on China's Central Economic Work Conference, I want to bring in Wang Yaojing, Assistant Professor at Peking University's School of Economics. Professor Wang, thank you for joining us. So, look, that meeting noted that China's economy has achieved a recovery with solid progress made in high-quality development this year. What would you say, Professor Wang, are the biggest factors that contributed to China's economic recovery in 2023?
Well, that is a tough question. And if I have to name one biggest factor, it would be the combination of a series of long-term policies that supported China's solid recovery this year. I'm not cheating with the mixtape here. And if you recall, the biggest challenges that we're facing this year are falling export or demand from abroad and insufficient demand from the domestic market. And how did China deal with them? We had the biggest export surge from renewable energy vehicles, which is a result from policies that were laid out more than 5 years ago. And while our trade with the U.S. is shrinking, many emerging markets, especially the BRI countries, are opening up their markets. And as for domestic market, our poverty alleviation program has done a significant part in forging households with higher income and willingness to consume. So we all say that the Rome is not built in one day. And in the same way, China's economic growth rely on a coordination and long-term planning and hard work from the whole country.
Right, so I guess policy accumulation, policy coordination, definitely a big factor in China's economic recovery. Professor Wang, what notable achievements have you seen in terms of China's high-quality development this year?
Well, by its name, high-quality development is not about the quantity or how many goods are produced, but about the structure and efficiency, like what goods are produced and how efficiently they're produced. And traditionally, China has been in the labor-intensive department, but this year, China is now leading in some of the areas that are capital and technology intensive, such as the electric vehicles. China just surpassed Japan and became the #1 car exporter in the world as we speak from November's numbers. China is also exporting internet platforms such as TikTok, Shine, and other digital innovations that reshape the landscape of the industry in the world. This marks notable transition moment that China is going from low value added to high value added production, which is also the #1 priority mentioned in the meeting, that technology is what leads the modern industrial ecosystem.
And Professor Wang, the meeting also said that overall, favorable conditions outweigh unfavorable factors in China's development. What do you see as the favorable factors that will continue to support China as a major contributor to the global economy in the long run?
Well, towards the end of the year, we are seeing more organizations adjusting their forecast for China's economic growth this year upwards. And this is showing how the international community is recognizing China's efforts and its recovery pace and its contribution to the world economy. And one favorable factor is what I have mentioned, technology advancement. And China has been one of the fastest growing country in R&D investment, and technology advancement is not only going to benefit China, but also to contribute to the world economy in a lasting and profound way. And the other one factor, to my opinion is that our determination in battling the climate change, our commitment to achieving carbon neutral is firm as ever, and we're ahead of schedule in hitting the emission reduction target, which gives confidence to the rest of the international community. And China will continue to be a major contributor to the global economy and be an active participant for the economy to become greener.
And finally, Professor Wang, based on the signal sent from the recent CPC Central Committee Political Bureau meeting and now, of course, the Central Economic Work Conference, how do you think China's policymakers will prioritize economic work for next year?
So the meeting listed out 9 specific areas that would be the focus next year. Besides R&D, domestic consumption market, and international trade that we just mentioned, what comes in third is deepening reforms in crucial areas such as the market competition and financial system. And the meeting especially mentioned risk control as the 5th priority, especially in real estate and local government debt and medium small financial institutions. And maintaining the financial market stability is a necessary condition for a steady economic recovery, and local governments might need to coordinate to resolve debt issues. And overall, the signal from this meeting is to give the market confidence that the government is aware and actively dealing with the possible risk factors, and the government still has a big toolbox and will be using them in a cautious and effective way to ensure China's economic growth continue to be robust in the next year.
All right, Professor Wang, always a pleasure speaking with you. Professor Wang Yaojing, Assistant Professor at Peking University School of Economics. Thank you. Well, throughout this year, the financial industry in Xicheng District here in Beijing has undergone continuous upgrades. In the first 3 quarters of this year, its major economic indicators have shown strong growth, surpassing the national average. CGTN's Olivia He reports.
Just 8 years ago, what's now a high-tech innovation zone and finance center in Beijing's Xicheng District was better known as the city's largest clothing market and a bus hub near the city zoo.
After years of development, now there is a strong presence of modern finance and technology here.
I think Xicheng District has the most impact on our daily income and spending.
Xicheng District, located in the central urban area of Beijing, is famous for its historical and cultural significance. With its rich cultural heritage and convenient location, it's become an attractive destination for many financial institutions, establishing itself as the main financial center of the capital. In the first 3 quarters of 2023, the main economic indicators of Xicheng District have shown strong growth, including 2 first-place rankings and 3 significant increases. Firstly, the added value of its financial industry ranks first in the city. From the first to the third quarter, Xicheng District achieved a regional GDP of 430 billion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 5.4%, outperforming the city's growth for 6 consecutive quarters. Another area where Xicheng District is leading the way is in residence income. In the first 3 quarters, the average disposable income per person for residents in Xicheng District was around 78,000 yuan, which is over 16,000 yuan higher than the city's average. Regarding consumption patterns, there's been a significant increase in spending on clothing, transportation, education, culture and entertainment, and residents' consumption tendencies continue to rise. During this Beijing Financial Street Forum, representatives from the Xicheng District mentioned a significant increase in consumption, investment, and fiscal revenue during the first 3 quarters. This growth has really helped fuel nationwide high-quality development of the financial industry. Olivia He, CGTN, Beijing.
And China's State Council has unveiled a set of measures aimed at accelerating the integrated development of domestic and foreign trade. The State Council emphasized that this acceleration is crucial for establishing a new development pattern and promoting high-quality economic growth. These measures are also intended to bolster domestic demand and stabilize enterprises here in China. The measures focus on improving the alignment of domestic and foreign trade rules and systems to facilitate smooth flows of resources in domestic and international trade. The measures also include supporting companies engaged in foreign trade to expand their presence in the domestic market and encouraging domestic firms to tap opportunities in foreign markets. Recognizing the significance of fiscal and financial policies in driving integrated development, the State Council has called for their support in facilitating the implementation of these measures. And earlier, CGTN spoke with Wang Dan, chief economist of Hang Seng Bank China, to get her thoughts on the measures on accelerating the integrated development of domestic and foreign trade. Take a listen.
For me, there are main two highlights that stand out. One is about exploring new markets because domestic producers have improved their technique and the cost efficiency is so high now. The scale of domestic economy, albeit big, is not enough to absorb all the production capacity. So there is a need to explore new overseas market, especially consumer market. And Southeast Asia is one of the key areas. And secondly, there has to be an establishment of a standard. The standard for domestic trade and foreign trade have to be aligned. Previously, companies and products have to follow different standards, and that have created trade barriers, and we need to eliminate that.
And up next, here on Global Business. As the COP28 Climate Summit enters its final day, divisions still linger on reaching that final deal to phase out fossil fuels.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
The UN Climate Conference in Dubai has entered its final scheduled day, and nations are still having a hard time reaching a solid agreement on the phase-out of fossil fuels. Now, a draft of a potential climate deal drew criticism from Western and Pacific countries for stopping short of a phase-out. The draft called for countries to reduce consumption and production in a just, orderly, and equitable manner. Talks are expected to go beyond the official summit due to the lack of agreement. Meanwhile, delegates approved a proposal for the next climate conference, COP29, to be held in Azerbaijan. All right, let's head over now to COP28 in Dubai and check in with our Yasser Hakim in Dubai for more. Yasser, thank you so much for joining us. So what is the latest on the ground after the negative reaction from many countries towards that draft text by the COP presidency last night?
Yes, so far everyone is still waiting for a new text draft to be issued anytime today. We understand that they are now negotiating a new draft with the COP presidency. Now, this draft should be in the next few hours, and then it will go through another phase of negotiation. So the next draft is not expected to be the final one. The Secretary General or Director General of the COP28 came up with a presser today just to put the COP presidency's point of view on the draft that has been so controversial in the last few hours. And he said that this is just a starting point, and that the COP presidency, led by the United Arab Emirates, is actually testing the waters with this draft to see the reaction from the countries. What are the red lines, like he said? And based on the first draft, now the parties involved, which are the negotiating countries, over 150, 190 countries, are now mapping out what they feel would be more appropriate, that would get the consensus for a final resolution to be adopted. One of the surprising events today is that one of the countries that had been staunch protesters of the draft, the UK, the secretary has left the COP, and he went back to London, and it was a kind of surprise in the middle of the critical talks at the last moments. He's the leading the UK delegation. He left back to the UK, as we know, is for some some vote to do with Parliament. Whether he will be back or not is considered a loss for the Europeans, who are the ones leading the criticism or the opposition to the draft and trying to find a new draft where the fossil fuels issue. This is the whole sticking point. Adding the fossil fuel phase down into the text. It was not clearly mentioned in the first text, and this has angered over 100 countries, including developed nations and islands like the Marshall Islands, who are very much affected by climate change. So it's just a waiting game today to see what will happen. Like I said, there will be a second draft. This second draft will be discussed, we believe, even from past COPs, that it will go on throughout the night. And maybe we'll have a final resolution by tomorrow morning. Back to you.
Okay, so a lot more talks need to happen before that final deal is sealed. Yasser, many thanks for that report. Our Yasser Hakim for us in Dubai at COP28. Thank you. Well, environmental organizations are calling for immediate measures to improve the air quality in Italy's most polluted cities. One of them is Cremona in the Lombardy region. Now, Cremona has consistently failed to meet EU and World Health Organization targets. Our Hermione Kitson reports.
Cremona is famous for its Romanesque cathedral, Italy's highest bell tower, and its ancient violins. However, it's also notorious as one of the country's most polluted cities.
It is very serious because the Po Valley is one of the 5 most polluted regional areas in Europe.
Figures by the European Environment Agency show that air in Cremona and the Po Valley has 4 times the World Health Organization's guideline limit for fine particulate matter. It's otherwise known as PM2.5 and has been linked to thousands of premature deaths.
I know that unfortunately the incidence of deadly diseases is above the norm, and that makes me really scared as a resident.
Unfortunately, at Cremona there are many problems associated with cancer. My partner recently also suffered from this problem.
Lombardy's Regional Environmental Protection Agency says the area's geography is partly to blame.
Po Valley is in a particular situation because mountains close Po Valley on 3 sides. So meteorological conditions are often adverse to air dispersion.
Pollutants therefore remain in the lowest part of the atmosphere and become more concentrated. Industry and agriculture are significant factors at play as the Po Valley is Italy's farming and manufacturing heartland. But with factories like these, it's clear to see the environmental cost of the region's economic importance. Italy has repeatedly failed to stay within the European Union's air quality limits, and new guidelines would reduce pollutants such as fine particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide by up to half by 2030. Authorities claim the situation has improved due to electric vehicles and other initiatives, but the EU and WHO targets are still out of reach.
Our meteorological conditions are so particular that even if our emissions are not worse than in other parts of Europe, we need more time.
Environmental groups say it's an excuse that's wearing thin.
There are areas that have a meteorological disadvantage, but it doesn't mean they have less responsibility.
And so, as authorities fight to extend their deadline, residents continue their battle to save lives. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Cremona.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.